The Tigers get blanked in a spring training contest as an opening day starter is announced. Ooh, super dramatic. You don't know who it is. Ooh.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Thursday, February 27th, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome in, welcome all. Hope you all are having a fantastic week so far. The Detroit Tigers get, shut out in a spring training contest. But the fact that they are playing baseball and Tarik Skubal was on the mound is a beautiful thing. We'll talk about that. We're also going to go over the injury report that was released from the organization itself, straight from the source, talk about any updates there. Parker Meadows being the big one, but Javi Baez is on there as well. We're also going to do a player preview on Kerry Carpenter, talk about his potentially big season that is looming, and discuss the new look TV broadcast booth for your Detroit Tigers in 2025 as well. Let's start off with this spring training game. 4-0 final against the Minnesota Twins. The Twins obviously winning that one. Tarik Skubal gets the start for Detroit, goes 2 innings, 1 hit, no runs, no walks, 1 strikeout. And the hit he gave up was on a 2-strike count. He was not very happy about it, but that was the only blemish in what was a fantastic 2 innings of work for the reigning American League Cy Young winner. How cool is that to say? You know, it's so cool hearing all of the media availability that he's had and seeing the people in the booth or the, the beat writers, the reporters around town, whatever, all just talk to him and ask him what his mindset is this year. And he genuinely is just like, last year's gone. It's a cool, memento. I have the trophy. That's awesome. But it's completely behind me. And we're on to 2025 now. And he says he wants to be one of those players that is good and brings it year in and year out. And obviously that's what we all want too. That's clearly what the organization expects out of him on top of that. So we will see what kind of year he has in store from us. For us, not from us. This was a great start, though. The stuff looked fantastic. We'll get to the velocity in a second because that in its own right is just absolutely nuts. But he threw a slider for his 1 strikeout, is a swinging strikeout, and the third strike was a slider that started on the outside to a righty and then came in on the inside. And just, man, his slider when it is on is basically a really long cutter. That is 90 miles an hour that thing was flying around today, and it's February. It was February 26th, and he was throwing 90-mile-an-hour sliders. On top of that, he was throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs. He's a psychopath. In the best possible way. He's ridiculous. That is absolutely nuts. You are psychotic. If you are going out there and just consistently pumping 100-mile-an-hour cheddar on February 26th, that's diabolical. So I'm glad that a guy with that mindset is on this team. I know some people, whenever there's high velo in spring training, there's always a group of people that is like, why is he throwing that hard? Don't, I trust Feder and co. Lund, Nieves, Hinch. I trust this pitching coaching staff literally with my life. I do not think that they would voluntarily put any pitcher in a situation to get seriously injured in February. Everything they do is so meticulous and so planned out and so coordinated to keep everybody healthy and playing at their peak for as long as possible. He threw 2 innings. I think it's okay from where I sit. Just doesn't change the fact that it's ridiculous in a positive connotation. That is nuts. Hey, man, first outing of spring. Let's just see what you got, kind of ramp up. Skubal's like, I've been throwing since December, so I am already ramped up. Here's 101 in on the hands. Disgusting. Absolute dog mentality there. The pitching is, outside of Skubal in this game, Brebbia got was this his first outing? It's so hard to keep track because not every game's on TV, but does get hit around a little bit. Not a great outing from him, but has plenty of time. We'll see what happens the rest of spring. Ty Madden with 2 innings of shutout work was good. The 2 strikeouts, I think, is really important for him. One of the biggest knocks I had against Madden kind of as he reached AAA, because he was so good in the lower levels of the minors when he was healthy, was, he needs more swing and miss. We need to see more strikeout stuff against high-end, major league caliber hitters. And while that wasn't consistently what he was facing, because this is still a spring training game, it was nice to see him rack up a couple of strikeouts in a couple of innings. Tyler Owens, I continue to be a huge fan of, got a strikeout as well. Matt Gage pitched in this one. Brendan White got hit around. That's unfortunate. One of the big stories, honestly, from this game is Tanner Kolep, who went out there for Detroit and only pitched in 2/3 of an inning and allowed a hit and a walk. So allowed 2 base runners, but also the 2 outs he recorded were strikeouts, and his stuff looked absolutely filthy. This is a guy we talked about a little bit, very, very briefly at points last season. And to see him and be able to showcase his stuff in a televised spring training game was really, really cool. And yeah, man, that fastball thing, the way it cuts, that'll play. That's a nasty pitch. So the pitching gives up 4 runs in this one. Not too, pressed about it any which direction. The offense gets shut out. Obviously, that's not great. When looking at the notable performances on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, we saw Gleyber Torres for the first time. He had a ground out and a strikeout. Looks great with the beard, though, by the way. Theron Lorenzo has, I think it was 4 plate appearances and 3 walks. He had 4 plate appearances and 1 at bat. So him getting, showing that he's seeing the ball well is good, because in his first couple of plate appearances of the spring that we actually got to see, he was kind of looked a little bit overwhelmed. And that's, again, it's first couple of plate appearances of a new season, and he played in the lower levels of the minor leagues last year. That doesn't make me out on him. That's just observation early on. So for him to be able to see the ball well enough to, I'm at least going to be patient here, take my pitches and draw 3 walks, I was pleased to see. Now it's just a matter of when we see him actually translate that into balls put in play. Not too much else, really. I mean, Torkelson had a pretty brutal strikeout in this game. Wenceel Perez 0-for-3 with a strikeout, but had his first at bat especially was pretty competitive. Zach McKinstry finally gets in a ball game. Eddie's Leonard again. I'm just reading names at this point. We can move on. The only other person I want to bring up is Jahmai Jones. And the reason why is not because he's had a unbelievable spring. He's hitting 250 with an RBI, but he is getting a lot of playing time. I want to say he's played in every game so far, at least in some capacity. And I think that is somewhat intentional. 27 years old. We talked about him a little bit when the Tigers brought him in the offseason. This is clearly minor league depth. This is not a guy that I think is going to make a push for the roster or anything like that. And I think in a perfect world, and that only meaning a perfect injury-free world, the Tigers probably want to be deep enough in the outfield where he doesn't have to play in the majors, but we don't live in a perfect world, so you have to plan for injuries and whatnot to happen. I think that they are playing him a lot because they want to really try and talk him into just being that depth outfielder that's not on the 40-man roster. But if 2 or 3 outfielders get hurt throughout the course of the season, Jahmai Jones is going to get the call at some point. That's my overreaction 3 games in, and I don't even know if that's an overreaction. Like, I'm just calling kind of what he is, an organizational depth piece. So we'll see how that continues, especially with the Akil Baddoo injury and the fact that that's going to sideline him for a little bit. Outfield depth in the minor leagues is something that needed to be improved, especially at like the AAA level. They have a lot of outfielders in the lower levels of the minors, but could use a little bit, a few more bodies there in like the high end AA or just straight up the AAA level. So I think that it's intentional that he's playing a lot, and he's probably assuming that he sticks with the organization after he doesn't make the roster on opening day, will probably fit into that role pretty nicely. Let's talk about injuries really quickly. Then we'll talk about the television booth for your Detroit Tigers in 2025. We'll do all of that right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. As always, making us your first listen every single day. Shouts to everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, will be back tomorrow as we recap another ball game for your Detroit Tigers as they play the Boston Red Sox. That looks like it's going to be Jack Flaherty's spring debut in 2025 for your Detroit Tigers. So we'll talk about that, as well as, it's a split squad. Look at that. We also play against Tampa Bay, it looks like, and that will be Matt Manning, who I think is very quietly one of the players that I am very, very interested in this spring training. I'm fascinated with the storyline that is Matt Manning. I've mentioned that a few times. We'll talk about all of that tomorrow. Let's talk about the injury report that came out actually on Tuesday for the Detroit Tigers organization. Akil Baddoo, we talked about at the time. Right hamate hook excision. I'm such a doctor. It's absolutely crazy. Javi Baez, right hip labral repair, is scheduled to complete his next base running session on Wednesday. That is yesterday as you're listening to this. He is completing all other camp activities. I would imagine next week is probably when we see Javi in a spring training game for the first time. Alex Cobb received an injection to further aid his recovery process and scheduled to play catch on Thursday as you are listening to this. Actually, it might have been Wednesday or Thursday, whatever. Wilmer Flores, right shoulder inflammation, completing rehab daily. Sir Gibson Long. Next bullpen session is Friday. Alex Lang's next bullpen session is Saturday. Tyler Madison, bullpen session on Wednesday. And Parker Meadows is the big one. Also Ricky Vanasco, bullpen session on Tuesday. Parker Meadows, upper arm discomfort during his most recent game after throwing a ball in from the outfield, which was on Saturday. He hasn't played since and is being treated daily. Will be reevaluated for baseball activities later this week. Great article by Evan Woodbury of MLive, kind of just highlighting what AJ had to say about the Parker Meadows injury and just kind of the injuries that the Tigers are experiencing right now as a whole. Mentioned, really downplayed it, I guess I should say. Did not freak out. And I guess that's like kind of his job. He's not going to freak out, even if it was devastating news. He's not going to, like absolutely crash out in the middle of media availability. But really did genuinely, like, I read these quotes and he's like, yeah, like we'd rather hold him out an extra day than not enough days. Like, okay, if we're talking about literally like which day specifically he could come back and it's still February, I think we probably shouldn't be too terribly worried. But it sounds like will be reevaluated later in the week. And when that happens, they'll determine how much longer he needs to rest and kind of reset. So hopefully it's nothing. Hopefully it genuinely is just inflammation, which is what they're labeling it as, and nothing else. And it's just a little sore, little bruise or something, and we can move on with our lives. And Superman does not miss any more time than he has to. The television booth in 2025 is going to have a slightly different look to it than we were used to, most notably who is not on the Tigers broadcast booth. I think a lot of people immediately were like, where is Johnny Kane? Where is Johnny Kane? Tony Paul of the Detroit News wrote a great article kind of highlighting how the booth is going to look this year and when you can expect it. It talks about how the West Coast games are not going to have pre and post game shows, at least definitely not post game shows as much anymore, because people already don't stay up till 10:30 unless you're one of the crazies like us to watch Tigers baseball. And on top of that, they're certainly not staying up till 2 a.m. to watch the post game show to justify the money that goes into producing it. So it sounds like they're cutting some of those, and they also are having the TV talent, the on-air talent, be hired through the organization, which is something we kind of saw the writing on the wall with when Benetti came in, because Benetti very famously, I guess is the word I'll use, was hired by the Tigers organization and not Bally at the time, now FanDuel Sports Network. It sounds like it's going to be him on play-by-play, as we are very well aware. Dan Dickerson will get the play-by-play on TV when Benetti is off doing a national game, and will be obviously the radio voice for whatever now, the 25th, 26th season in a row. Andy Dirks and Dan Petrie will be the color commentators for Jason Benetti in the booth on TV. Also, it sounds like Kurt Gibson, Todd Jones, and Carlos Pena will return as guest analysts throughout the season at different point, albeit not as much as maybe they were last season. Obviously, again, we've been talking about the names that are on there. Names like Johnny Kane, Mickey York, Natalie Kerwin, who did a great job last year, Trevor Thompson, who's been a staple in the community for a long time now. All of those people are not on this list. However, the team and the network also have not yet announced the full sideline reporter and pre and post game show lineup. So we're in this weird situation where we know who's going to be the on-air talent during games. And Daniela Bruce, huge congratulations to her. She has been absolutely fantastic for many years now and is taking a jump. She actually debuted in spring training for the Tigers as the sideline reporter on Wednesday afternoon's game. Did a fantastic job, as she always does great work for the Red Wings. I've been on a couple of shows with her over at Locked On Wings. So Daniela's awesome, and that's obviously a huge deal. So again, congratulations. She'll be a part of the team this year. And it's just about figuring out who else is going to be. Like I said, it's this weird in between where we know who the on-air talent is for games, but also at the same time, the full roster isn't completely announced. And there seems to be, reportedly, very openly, a spot open. And so in theory, any of those names I just listed could fill that spot and could just go and any of those people who have worked for the Tigers before could just work with them again. And we could have Daniela and Johnny Kane doing, pre and post game or doing sideline stuff. However it ends up working, I have no clue. I'm not a part of FanDuel Sports Network or the Detroit Tigers organization. I have zero clue. I have no insider info on what it's going to look like. But it is a fascinating spot we are in right now because there's still an opening. So we don't know for sure who isn't going to be there, but we know who for sure is going to be there. And it's not everyone from last season. So we'll see how that plays out. Okay. Really excited, though. Obviously, the Tigers, ever since Benetti came in, and really Todd Jones came in around that point, Carlos Pena, like I mentioned, Natalie Kerwin, but even the people that have been there for a while, Mickey York, Trevor Thompson, Johnny Kane have been staples, and they're all great. So we're very blessed with fantastic media personalities here and on-air talent for our pro sports teams here, collegiate level too, I guess. Don't want to discriminate against them. So really awesome. And we'll see what it looks like. But I'm excited for who it could be. And I'm also kind of sad that there's a potential that one of or multiple of those names that I just listed are not going to be a part of the TV broadcast. That is a little sad as well. So we'll see how it plays out. Let's talk Kerry Carpenter. Okay. We'll do that right after this. Got to talk to you today about our friends over at Wonderful Pistachios. If you're looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious, crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you feel fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And one of my favorite comments from yesterday's show on YouTube was we had a commenter put that they have to buy the pistachios with a shell because if they were to buy the pistachios without a shell, they would eat them too quickly. So I really appreciate that because that is kind of how I feel while eating Wonderful Pistachios. So you can always go to the in-shell option as well. Get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, everybody, welcome back. Your third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. As always, making us your first listen every single day. Today, we're going to talk about Kerry Carpenter. Kerry Bonds, man. What else is there really to say about him? Well, hopefully a lot, because that's my job. Was absolutely fantastic last year. 284 average, a 345 on base percentage, and a 587 slug. That is a 932 OPS. Only accumulated 2.5 Fangraphs WAR, but that's because he only played in 87 games. Just barely a tick over half of a season played, missed almost half the year with a couple of different injuries last season. That's fewer than 300 plate appearances, which just really sucks considering he was on pace for, what is that, just shy of 40 homers? I guess closer to about 35 home runs is what he was on pace for. Almost exactly 35 home runs. That in the middle of this lineup, or in the upper third of this lineup, would just go such a long way over the course of a full season, as we are well aware. That's not me telling you something you don't already blatantly know. We saw against Cleveland and really throughout the playoffs as a whole how much of a pure and utter difference maker this dude is when he is in the lineup consistently. They showed the stat a bunch last season. For OPS and just any really offensive metric against right-handed pitching, he was legitimately one of the 3 or 4 best hitters on the planet. His stats against righties are in the same breath as Ohtani and Judge and Soto and like players of that caliber. That is the type of hitter you are talking about. If you look at his righty-lefty splits, he had a 994 OPS and a 305 batting average against right-handed pitching a year ago. That is absolutely unbelievable. You pair that with a K rate of 25.3%. That's slightly worse than league average. I will take that 10 times out of 10 for the rest of my life. That is not egregious. Like that is not some catastrophically poor number. When he was coming up through the minors, I was worried that he was going to be a high strikeout, high power guy. And it's like, well, we need a power guy, so I'll take it. He is now at a point where he is within a couple percent of a league average strikeout rate. And that paired with a batting average in the mid 280s, right? An on-base percentage in the 340s, almost 350 range, and a career slug of over 500. I will gladly take a percent or two worse than league average in the strikeout department. Swing and miss, similar conversation. That's, I guess, a little bit higher. He got eaten alive by some spin low in the zone last year. He kind of went fishing a little bit, especially against lefties. We'll talk about that in a second because I know everybody wants to. And then his walk numbers, 7.5% last year. That's an improvement off of 2023, which was an improvement off of 2022. If he can be that slash line, right? If he can just maintain that, keep the power with where it's at right now, and then just be a league average strikeout and walk rate guy, he's going to be one of the best hitters on the planet. And I mean that genuinely. Like that equates to legitimately one of the better hitters in the American League. And we saw that last season when he was on the field. The two big talking points. Well, let's talk about his defense first, because I want to get that out of the way. I think he is good enough defensively now where you don't need to just be like he's only the DH. You can platoon him. You can play him in the outfield, and I have no issue with it. This is, again, a guy that I gave a lot of crap for early in his career for being as poor as he was defensively, and he's done nothing but improve in that regard. And I want to give him all the credit in the world because it feels like and I've said this a few times, it feels like every single time there's a narrative about Kerry Carpenter, or like there's holes being punched in his game, or like faults are being pointed out, within 2 months he's fixed them. And that is why, like, he has a great arm in the outfield. The range was around league average last year. Is a serviceable outfielder at this point, which I never thought I'd say if you watched him play defense in 2022. So all of that improvement and the adjustments and the development that he's had is why everyone wants to talk about him against lefties. We'll start with spring training, okay? Baby steps. 1 foot in front of the other, as the old adage goes. Let's see how he looks against left-handed pitching in spring training. That's going to be a really big factor in kind of how he is used early in the season. Last year had a 107 average and a 408 OPS against lefties. In 2023 had a 657 OPS against lefties, and in 2022 a 598. So he's never hit particularly well against left-handed pitching, and this past year was atrocious. But this last year he also only had 32 plate appearances against left-handed pitchers the whole season. It is very hard to get better at something when you are not put in a situation to be able to improve upon it. And that is how I feel in regards to Kerry Carpenter against lefties. And the reason why is because if you look at his minor league career, and I'm not saying we should get in the habit of comparing minor league pitching to major league pitching, because that has bitten us plenty of times. And that is not something that anyone should do on a consistent basis. But given where his skill level was at that point, he was never an awful hitter against lefties going through the system. Especially once his big coming out party happened and he started raking in 2022. Did not ever struggle consistently against lefties. And then he gets to the majors and he has no opportunities against them. I would love for him to, again, I've said this a million times, he does not even need to be a 994 OPS guy against left-handed pitching. He doesn't even need to be close to that. If he has a 680 OPS, literally a 680, 675 OPS against left-handed pitching, he is going to have one of the highest OPSs in baseball, assuming he stays on the field. Like that is the type of talent we're talking about against righties. And him even being that serviceable level of hitter against lefties would lead to so much more roster flexibility and lineup flexibility with Kerry Carpenter and for AJ Hinch. I think you can be a lot more selective and be like, okay, this lefty specifically eats alive left-handed hitters. You won't play against him. But this lefty doesn't really have any difference in his splits. You can play against him. You can have objectively your best hitter in the lineup more often. So that is a big ask, and that's a lot easier said than done. But that is something I'm looking for out of Kerry Carpenter this season because it has been done in other levels. The other big question is fairly obvious, and that's just, can he stay on the field? You look at the games played in his career, it's 31 in 2022. Obviously, he started off that season in the minors, so that's just like his call-up year. That doesn't even really count. 2023, played in 118 games, missed a solid month and a half, almost 2 months of that season, and 2024 missed almost half of the season. You need this guy on the field. He had more WAR in 2024 than he did in his amazing 2023 campaign And that was in almost 31 fewer games. He can be the best hitter on your team. He can be one of the most valuable pieces on your team. And you desperately need this dude to just stay healthy this season. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We, of course, will be back tomorrow as we recap more spring training baseball, do more player previews, and start talking about this 2025 regular season. All right? I appreciate you all greatly. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch y'all tomorrow, baby. Go Tigers.